Hey chess lovers, here's another opening line you probably have never seen before. Still looking at the weird French where you play knight c6, not pawn to d5. So on move number 2, you just go knight c6, surprising your opponents. I'm sure most of you guys who watched my previous video on this amazing defense already know what we are up to. Just a quick one, if white plays pawn to d5, you know from here we are more likely going to get a draw after sacrificing our knight like this and start giving endless checks with our queen on these highlighted squares. This is proven to be a draw, theoretically speaking, and if you want to know how, you better watch my previous video because I'm not going to repeat content. I swear upon my elbows, today I want to cover something else. Anyways, one question that came up in the comments was, what if white plays pawn to g3? Easy peasy. You just go queen takes, that comes with check, and on the next move you win a free rook. But anyway, in today's video, the question that begs to be answered is this: what if white doesn't play pawn to d5? In fact, the top played move in the master's database is knight f3 followed by knight c3. We only see pawn to d5 in the Nh6 database. This is what most people play in rapid, blitz, and bullet. But if they are risk averse, they go knight f3 and sometimes c4. Before I show you what I want to show you, I want you guys to do me a favor. If you will find this video to be interesting, simply subscribe. If you haven't already, hit the like button and leave a comment. And if you want us to reach a wider audience and beat the algorithm together, simply share this video. I will leave the link in the comment section down below. What you're about to see is evil and unacceptable in the world of chess. Let's begin. Knight f3. What do? Well, my top recommendation is for you guys to do what Levon Aronian does. Pawn to d5. This is what I want you guys to be doing. So now you know this is not a dubious opening response to e4. Anyway, so you go d5. And they are more likely going to play pawn to e5 anyways, turning this back to the normal variation of the French. But in this kind of French, you don't have c5. So this is why you start attacking right away on the king side, beginning with pawn to f6. Magnus Carlsen has also played this with much success, by the way. With f6, you just want to take on e5, period. And after pawn takes, the c5 square will become free and open for bishop c5. Once again, after taking on e5, you will pave way for your king's rook that is going to start controlling the semi-open file along the f file. Anyway, at this point, most of your opponents will play bishop b5. That's the top played move, after which you can simply go bishop d7. Why? You're just unpinning your knight. I don't know why, but the top played move everywhere is bishop takes, after which you take back with your bishop. And now you know how you free up your light squared bishop in this type of French. They castle short, and this is when you play queen d7. Probably on the next move you might even want to castle long if you think about it. On Lichess, people play knight c3, just developing normally. I still like the idea of castling long, that's okay. But here you can just go knight e7. By the way, if e takes f6, you are happy to open the g file for your king's rook. That's the whole idea, and you can tell from the eval bar black is doing great. You're going to castle long in the near future anyways. There is no any deadly attack that will come on the queen side. If bishop g5, a weird move that Stockfish recommends for no reason, you just go bishop g7 anyways. And if bishop f4, you go knight g6. So it doesn't even make sense at human level. They play rook e1, but still you go knight g6. That's the other purpose of playing knight e7, by the way. It's not every time you put your knight on f5. Queen e2, they want to take on e6. But here you can just go king f7 and hold everything. This is very much playable. White can't do anything, by the way. Think of whatever aggressive moves you want, but there's just nothing in this position. h4, you go h5. a3, maybe they want to start advancing on the queen side. You just develop your bishop. Everything is safe. b4, they want to do this, so you go pawn to a6, stopping that. If a4, you just take. And from there, you're going to bring your a rook into the game, put your rook on g8. If anything, I think black is doing better in this position, which is why Stockfish likes this. So just think of putting your king on f7, supporting your e6 pawn. You won't have any weaknesses. Your position is super solid. So this is how you play the normal line if white plays knight f3 on the third move. Just go pawn to d5, and after e5 you go pawn to f6 rather than going home. Again, bishop b5, you unpin your knight. White has to take. By the way, see one error that most chess players on Lichess make. You just played bishop d7 to unpin your knight. Remember, if white plays a careless move like castle short in this position, you can simply win a pawn like this. Pap, you are attacking the light squared bishop, by the way. That will come with another attack on the rook. So they take on d7, and then you go knight takes d7. In this position, you're just up a pawn for nothing, and you just continue being solid. By the way, rook e1 can always be met with king f7. Now you know deep theory, you guys. Your king on f7 will be the safest piece on earth. There's nothing, absolutely nothing white can do to enter into your territory. Even queen e2 doesn't work due to queen e8 in this position. h4 once again, you can go h5 and consider playing bishop d6 next. For example, even if pawn to c4 is played, you can just go pawn to c6, kind of the same Slav. Look at this. If knight c3, you go bishop d6. What else do you know? If this, you retreat your bishop. In this position, you also develop your knight on this side of the board, and bam. Oh, bam. So this is to say, knight c6 is a very safe move. Don't even worry about this. Knight f3 can just be met with pawn to d5, and on the next move, you play pawn to f6. These are the only opening moves you need to keep in mind. But not too fast. Once again, after bishop b5 and bishop d7, we saw what happens if white castles short. You just take and then take. Even if they play pawn to c3, you can just take on e5. Yes, maybe this time they might want to do a little trick where they take on e5 first, and you just need to be a little bit careful here, because if you just go ahead and take the bishop, they have queen h5 check, and you will end up giving some material. Your rook will be in trouble. So instead of taking the last squad bishop, just take the knight. This is still pinned, so if bishop takes, you just take back like this. They might play queen h5 check. Again, here I wouldn't mind playing pawn to g6, because I know after queen takes, I'm just going to play bishop g7, defend my rook, and still attacking the queen. After queen e2, I go knight f6 or knight e7, the move I like. Castle short, rook e1, attack on the pawn. Of course, you're going to lose this pawn, so you can just go knight c6. If check, you're doing better according to Stockfish due to bishop takes d4, sacrifice. Besides, with bishop takes, you are also threatening to take on f2. This is just how dangerous this position is. Maybe they should play something like bishop e3, but again, after bishop e5, I don't know what white can do from here. You have king f7 coming. If pawn to f4, that's just a sacrifice. You can do this, and on the next move, consider winning this poor rook like this. So you can just go knight c6. If check, you're doing better according to Stockfish due to bishop takes d4, sacrifice. Because after pawn takes, you have knight takes d4, attack on the rook, and look at this. Whatever white would do, you're going to win that rook and rescue your knight. So you're going to be up on exchange in this particular position. But even better, just go rook f e8, threatening to checkmate at the back. If they take, you just take back, and maybe after something like pawn to g3 or bishop d2, developing a piece, you still go knight c2, winning that rook. So I promise your opponents won't see this long-term trap coming where you allow them to take on e6. This looks scary, but according to Stockfish, it's only black who gets out with a better position. So once again, never be afraid to give up your e6 pawn in this particular line. Once again, after knight f3, d5, e5, and pawn to f6, you know the idea is just to take and free up the c5 square. For example, if white plays pawn to c3, yeah, it's up to you to transpose back if you want to get back to whatever I showed you. But the whole idea is just to take on e5. If knight takes, you take back. At the end of the day, you're going to have the c5 square open for your dark squad bishop. If pawn takes, the move you can rely on in this position is knight h6. Trust me, this is the top engine move and what super grandmasters recommend to do in this particular position, because white can't just do anything. In fact, after knight h6, you even consider castling short. I'll show you what to do. But if you are not a risk taker, you can consider playing pawn to g6, bishop g7, and knight ge7, followed by castle short. That's okay. But I just love this. Of course, this invites bishop takes, but look at the evil bar. The game is still equal, technically speaking. You just take back, and there's nothing white can do to take advantage of your weakness on the king side. Queen d2 will be a sheer waste of time. Your pawn is already defended by your bishop. If bishop d3, by the way, you can still go bishop g7. With bishop g7, you are double attacking the e5 pawn, by the way, which is why most white players play queen e2, defending that twice. And this is where you can just castle short. Your h6 pawn is your greatest defender. Now, what if white plays knight f3, and then after d5, they go e5, you play pawn to f6. Instead of them playing bishop b5 or c3, they play bishop f4. But of course, you can just take even in this position and open that c5 square. But the best you can do here, theoretically speaking, is to go g5. Start attacking that bishop right away. If bishop g3, you can go f5, h5, bishop d7, and all that. But I find g4 to be more tricky because after knight h4, the top played move, you have pawn to f4, and there's a question mark on these two minor pieces for white. E.g., if they play pawn to f3, here you can just win their knight by going bishop d7. There's nothing they can do. By the way, if you thought pawn to f4 was winning, nope. White had bishop f2, still protecting that. Even if you go bishop e7 this time, there's pawn to g3. So you still have to use your tactical vision wisely. Don't just play anyhow. Bishop e7 in this position is the move. So that's what you do against this bishop f4 line. Just go g5, g4, and f5. Start advancing on the king side. After all, you are just one move away from castling long should things go wrong. Or just leave your king on the center of the board. You can put it on f7 if white doesn't allow you to go long. Anyway, instead of bishop f4, what if white just takes the f6 pawn? Theory encourages to take with a knight, not with a queen. That's the whole idea. If bishop g5 pin on your knight, you can go bishop e7 if you want, or just bishop d6. Even h6 works, but hold on. Avoid making lots of pawn moves in the opening stage. Just continue with your piece development. That's what you do in the opening. Let's say pawn to c4, you just cast a shot. c5 is not good because white is going to give up their center if they play c5 anyway. That's why they take on d5, and then you just take back with your e-pawn. You still have a semi-open file. Say bishop d3, queen e8 check, queen e2, queen f7. Look at this. Cast a shot, bishop g4, and this is coming. So this is only good for black once again. One master level line that I almost forgot in the knight f3 variation is where white doesn't advance their e-pawn. For example, you will see your opponents playing knight b d2 in this position, or knight c3. So taking is okay, but knight f6 is more positional. Just giving white one more chance to advance their pawn, because if not, you are going to take on e4, right? And after this, you don't want to become super passive with knight d7. The move to consider is knight e4. If anything, you just want to take on c3. That's all. At least your development will be very simple and easy from there. If knight takes, you just take back, and after knight g5, they want to take back. This is bad for white. Due to queen takes, you want to take the e5 pawn. After queen takes, you take back on d4 with tempo. White needs to hold on to their c2 pawn so that they don't even lose the rook. And now this is where you can play knight c6 because you want to take this pawn. After knight takes e4, if bishop f4 is played, attack another pawn. From here, I don't even know what white should do, honestly speaking. Maybe bishop b5, but you just unpin your knight. If knight takes, attacking your bishop, you go bishop d4 because you want to take here. Bishop takes, you take back like this, attacking the knight, and indirectly attacking the g2 pawn. So this is only good for black. You even have castle long after something like pawn to c3, by the way. You can just do this. So this is what you do after pawn to d5 and white does not advance their e-pawn. Again, if knight c3, you just go knight f6, giving white one more chance to advance their e-pawn, which they do most of the times. If they want to be stubborn with moves like bishop g5, you just go bishop e7 and pinning your knight, still threatening to take on e4 if you think about it. Once again, if e5, no need to go knight d7 in the French. You just play knight e4. There is pressure here. If knight takes, you take back with the pawn, attack the knight. They're going to take your bishop, obviously. And now you take back with your queen. Of course, the plan is just to oversimplify the game. If knight takes, you take back. There's no knight g5 this time. If knight d2, you take the d4 pawn. If the knight goes back to g1, here is another way you can take the d4 pawn by going queen b4 check. If c3, it's not just about the d4 pawn, it's also about the b2 pawn. d5 check, knight takes. So this is one stubborn line you're going to face, and you should know what to do against this. Now you know what to do after knight f3. What if white plays the third common move in the Lichess database, pawn to c4? Well, after this, there's a way to transpose the game back to the Nh6 defense if you think about it. If you want to know more about the Nh6 defense, I have a new course which you can find on my Patreon page or on my website, kasperchess.com. d5 also works very well. This will just open up many lines. So the way I would start this is by going bishop b4 if I want to transpose back to the Nh6, and after knight c3, I just take, mess up white's pawn structure on the queen side, and then go pawn to e5. It is pointless for white to play pawn takes. They're just going to have these pawn islands. If pawn to d5, I want to go knight c e7. If d6, I just take. If knight f3, I go pawn to d6. And after bishop d3, I can go knight g6. Let's say cast shot. I go knight f6. Whenever I see a4, I love closing the queen side completely. Bishop pin. I go h6. After bishop e3, I know they want to push pawn to c5, so I play pawn to b6 to stop that. And after pawn to h3, maybe preventing, my bishop g4 move. This is where I castle short or go knight h5, because at the end of the day, if this tactic comes, I know I'm going to walk away with a free bishop, which most of them do hang. This is all in the Nh6 defense, and you can find similar traps in my new Nh6 defense course. Check it out on my Patreon page. The link is in the comment section down below. But again, after c4, if you just want to be principled, you can go pawn to d5. Of course, they take back with their c pawn, you take back, and this is where they play e5, just like we saw before. Once again, if you just want to play an open game, you can still start with pawn to f6. This is okay, because you just want to take. If ef, you take back with your knight. If knight f3, the whole idea is to take and then remain with a passed pawn that you're going to start pushing in the end game. You can start with bishop b4 check first to start eliminating some pieces. With bishop d2, you go knight e7, you want to castle short, bishop takes, knight takes, queen check, knight back, bishop b5, castle short, and life continues. Sometimes after c4 and pawn to d5, they might not take immediately, but instead go pawn to e5. Or just like before, you want to free up your dark squared bishop first if you have a chance. You can also take on c4, it's not much of a stretch. In fact, I'll do this so that if white takes, I get a free pawn. Anyway, so at the end of the day, it is up to you to choose which opening response you want to continue with after c4. Is it the Nh6 defense where you play pawn to e5 later on, or the pawn to d5 line immediately? I like both, but I'm more familiar with the Nh6 defense, so I would play the Nh6 in this position. Last but not the least, what if white doesn't play knight f3 or pawn to c4? Let's say they play knight c3. I don't believe in this. First, you can pin that knight and get rid of it if you want to, or just go pawn to d5 right away, because d5 will transpose back to whatever I showed you, where you go pawn to f6. If bishop b5 this time, you go bishop d7 once again after knight f3. Listen, this time there's no knight takes e5 because white's light squared bishop is defended by their knight, so be wise, don't just remove things. So the other plan of playing like this in the knight c3 line is to go queen e7 and castle long in the near future. For example, after white castles short, you first of all go queen f7. That's what theory says. Why queen f7? Because you just created room for knight ge7 and knight g6 next, or knight f5. So this is logical. This is what is acceptable. If rook e1, this is where you castle long. That's if you want. Or go knight ge7 to be ahead in development. If bishop takes, this time you can even take back with your knight. If queen e2, go s6, ef, gf, bishop takes, knight takes, knight takes. The pawn is pinned, so you just castle long. Yes, even though you are down a pawn, you are way ahead in development with a greater initiative and more open lines. Knight c3, rook g8, bishop f4, and knight takes, because if knight takes, you have pawn to e5. All these tactics and an open king side, if you think about it, bishop h3, pap, bishop g7, and you will end up winning a free piece. So my top recommendation after any of these lines is to go d5 and pawn to f6. Play this type of French where you even give up your knight at the edge of the board, knowing that white won't do anything to you, and even castle short. This is what I recommend doing in this type of French for now. Right, this video was sponsored by all of our paid members on Patreon. These are the guys who support Casper Chess financially. In return, we give them extra study materials and other premium content on Patreon to thank them in style. Not to mention that all of our patrons are at liberty to make video requests and ask any chess related questions. You can join free membership and pay later if you want through the link in the comment section down below.